Hey everyone, Travis here, and Macs can game now? Ever since the switch to Apple Silicon, we've been getting some massive upgrades in the CPU and GPU department on all of these new computers in the last 3 years, and it's really begged the question for me, can Macs actually game now? Ultimately, this comes down to not a lack of hardware, but a lack of software. Developers need to make a Mac-specific version of their game, and with Mac as a platform being less than a fraction of a percent being used for gaming, why would you want to invest in such a small market? More recently, Apple has had a push into the direction of being a better platform for gaming. To name a few things that Apple has released to be more gaming oriented is the Metal 3 graphics API, which provides more features for gaming, such as upscaling. Upscaling has become very popular in the gaming world as of late, and it offers the ability to run a game at a lower internal resolution, requiring less power, and be able to output a higher resolution for better quality. Or at least in some cases, it says that it's better quality, but you can still tell that it's upscaling. And additionally, macOS Sonoma has more gaming-specific features like a gaming-specific mode when a game is launched, and even more first-party controller support. Since software is the biggest problem for Mac gaming, where are we today? Well, it's quite a bit better than it has been in a long time. We actually have some modern Mac games that are not old titles that are available in the App Store and in Steam. One of those examples is Resident Evil 4 Remake, which came out on December 20th. This game originally came out in the first quarter of 2023, so it still makes it within the last year. And Baldur's Gate 3, which got a Mac version in the same release window as the Windows and PlayStation version. Alongside with these games are some other titles like Lies of P and Stray that are also more modern titles. Now, to test current Mac gaming performance, I did have a few options, and I chose one that might surprise you. I wanted to test the lowest common denominator out of the newest set of machines, so I went with the M2 15-inch MacBook Air. This machine has a vanilla M2 chip with 16 gigs of RAM and a 1TB SSD, and the hope here is to get a Steam Deck-like experience from a machine like this. Now, of course, there are much more powerful Macs in the lineup like a Mac Studio or an M3 Max MacBook Pro, but if it can run well on an M2 Air, it'll run great on any of those. And I think it's much more likely for someone to have a MacBook Air than it is a maxed out Mac Studio. First up is Resident Evil 4, which, like I said, just came out, and this is not a light title. This is a full-on remake of the 2005 original in the newer Capcom engine. This title is available on PS4 as well as PS5 and Windows and Xbox, of course, but if we could get at least a PS4 level experience out of the MacBook Air, I'd be happy with that. PS4 itself doesn't quite hit 1080p at 60 frames per second, so this should be a decent goal to hit. I'm targeting 1080p with medium settings with metal upscaling set to quality, and let's see how it goes. After playing this for a little while, and this is on the first level, of course, I am quite surprised. I do have to keep my expectations in check here. This is a MacBook Air that is fanless with a low TDP M2 chip, and it is actually performing quite well. This brings in more than a playable experience if I wanted to take this on the go with me, and it was the only device I had and I wanted to fire up some Resident Evil, it would be great. Next up is Baldur's Gate 3 via Steam, and this runs okay. You can definitely tell that this is much more of a demanding title than Resident Evil in terms of what's going on in the world, but I'm not the most experienced with this game. Now, I wanted to get some thoughts from someone that actually previously hosted on this channel and someone that knows a lot more about Baldur's Gate 3, so take it away, Kevin.
I don't think I've been on this channel since like 2012. For those of you that don't watch my channel or don't remember me from the early days of TLD, my name's Kevin Kenson. I used to do like app game reviews and stuff on this channel way back when, and nowadays I talk more about console hardware on my main channel. That's just my name. And Travis does not play RPGs, so he wanted me to check out Baldur's Gate 3 on Mac. So quick background on my previous experience with Baldur's Gate 3. I've primarily played this on PC as a platform, Steam specifically. I mostly play on my at-home PC that is a fairly up-to-date build, so I'm able to hit pretty high frame rates while running all these settings on high, while running the game on 1080p. I'm using a 1080p high refresh rate monitor generally there, but I've also put a decent bit of time on some of the recent PC handhelds, namely the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, which I think is actually a more interesting point of comparison as far as low power goes, because what I'm playing on right now is a MacBook Air. This isn't exactly a top-of-the-line item, but it is something that is maybe a little more common in households versus a more expensive MacBook Pro. And I gotta say, I mean, look, is this the absolute best looking version of the game or the best way to experience it? No, probably not. But it runs. it's actually running pretty well. Let me actually double check what settings we got going on right here. So we're looking at 900p as our base resolution, FSR set to ultra quality. We're doing medium preset for a lot of the visuals. I could definitely tell a little bit of where the FSR is putting in work because it always just looks a little bit bizarre to me. But we have a stable frame rate. We're currently averaging around 50. Honestly, with a game like this, you could probably adjust the settings to aim more like for 30, because don't get me wrong, I like a higher frame rate. 60 always looks nice, but Baldur's Gate is not one of those games where I would say it's mechanically required. You could definitely get away with a stable 30, and this would still look really solid. I will say one thing worth pointing out is that Baldur's Gate 3's performance is, in general, a little all over the place. Right now, I'm just playing through the opening area of the game, which is a little bit more forgiving. Act 3, where you enter a city, and there's just a lot more stuff everywhere, a lot more NPCs, buildings, all that kind of stuff. Performance tends to take a little bit more of a hit there, so I would be curious to see how this holds up in those later stages. But considering that right now we're working at 45 FPS, and again, I think 30 is fine for this particular title, I think you can handle it. Look, I've kind of had this thought about Mac gaming in general for a while now, that I wish more stuff was just readily supported, or Apple worked on their own way of being able to adapt games that aren't built for it to run at least, semi-efficiently, because I use a MacBook primarily for work and editing, but if it was able to also run games well, I would be doing a healthy bit of gaming on there just because I have access to it and wouldn't really need a gaming laptop so much as a result. I would still be interested in PC handhelds, as well as having a dedicated desktop gaming PC, but for a laptop solution, if MacBook could just do both, that'd be great. And really, the kind of games that I'm generally into on PC, particularly a lot of isometric RPGs, a lot of those are Mac compatible right now, and I have spent time playing them on my MacBook. Disco Elysium, I think, is a really good example of something that is not particularly demanding and runs perfectly fine and great on MacBook.
All right, after testing Resident Evil 4 and Baldur's Gate, it gives me a little bit of a better idea that we are in a good place for Mac gaming now. We actually have some modern titles, we have much better macOS integration, and we have better gaming features, but what does the future look like for gaming on the Mac? We are in the third generation of Apple Silicon with M3, and with those M3 chips, Apple added hardware-level acceleration for ray tracing. So now that we actually have CPUs and GPUs that can hang for Mac gaming, all we need is more games. And ultimately, this comes down to Apple needing to build better relationships with game developers, as they've done with Kojima and Capcom. If we could have day one release of a game, or a few weeks after release as it sits on other platforms on the Mac, this could definitely be a viable option. One of the biggest components that can make all this happen is a feature that Apple came out with recently called the Game Porting Toolkit, which allows for much faster porting to Mac from Windows, requiring less investment from a developer to get a game running on the platform, and with some optimizations could get these games running really good. A side phenomenon that's happening outside of the Mac gaming world is the PC handhelds. The Steam Deck and the ROG Ally are two examples of some PC handhelds that have lesser hardware but are getting more and more popular, resulting in games running at lower resolutions and frame rates, but people are enjoying them because they're on the go. And as time goes on and more game developers spend time optimizing their games for these lesser powerful pieces of hardware, that could be very beneficial in porting those games to Mac. Now, referencing the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, if developers spent more time on optimization, as they do with the Switch, let's say, and get a lot out of a little bit, this lines right up with Apple's goal of performance per watt on Apple Silicon. The most amount of performance out of the smallest amount of power, which ultimately, with those two things combined, could make for the perfect storm for Mac gaming. Comment down below your thoughts on Mac gaming and whether you think it's crazy or not. Thank you so much for watching. This is Travis, and have a good night.